Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody slept really well. No, it was wonderful yesterday. And today we would like to show you our newest member of the 2sxc family, which we're calling Radmin. So basically this is what we're trying to do. This is a very common task, to create some kind of table where we're helping somebody administer something. And very often, as you can see in this example, we have a lot of tiny little special needs. And typically you will end up doing something and then redoing it and doing it better. For example, you might want to say, I want to have a true-false column, but just writing true-false would suck. Sometimes you need a link between things, and this always takes some custom work. Then you need search, etc. And we wanted to make all of this just possible in a few clicks. And the reason why we waited this long is because we had to get app extensions to work first, because with all the things that we do in 2sxc, our biggest problem is if we bundle it as part of 2sxc, it's going to have to work for years to come. So if our first idea wasn't perfect, we're usually going to suffer for years. And we wanted to make sure this kind of functionality can be included as an extension. And if somebody else has a better way of doing it, they can also make an extension and it'll feel like the same thing. You can just add it to something. So here's our thing. And thank you to the sponsors. And if you want to support 2sxc, do become a patron, right? You can just give us a monthly contribution. You get some extra goodies as well. We would really appreciate that. So let's have a look at what we're solving. Here's an example of one of the projects that we have where we manually created a table. We used a JavaScript table. You can see it has some kind of a listing and a paging. And this was a JavaScript solution. And we have about 30 of these pages on that application. It's quite sophisticated. But of course what happens is each one is a copy-paste of the previous one and then some adjustments. And it takes time every time. And if somebody has a better idea of improving it, they basically start over and you just have a jumble of code. Yes?
Who is using this table? Because what is the end user seeing and who is using this table?
So in this example, this is a table for, let's say, the editors, for the admins. But not us admins, but the administrator of the website.
Client?
Yes.
Yes, okay, they see this
And in this case, they're administering, I think these are some special instructions on the school system platform. And they want to, because the instructions themselves appear elsewhere in special contexts, they don't edit them there, so they need a list of this. It could be a list of tags on a blog, it could be anything. Yeah, and again, this is usually copy-paste, and depending on who copies it from where, it'll turn out to start to drift apart. And that's just how it used to be. Now, previously, again, typically people would start with an HTML table, with a for each loop, some helper JavaScript. Then, very common, you would get a JavaScript library to at least add some minimum search. And as things progressed, it would get more and more sophisticated, and it would start to kind of become an application. And we can't, of course, do everything in a standard box, but we'd like to get like the 80% there that you just have it. So I'm going to hand over to Raul now, and he's going to show you how he's going to install the app extension, how he's just going to add it to a page, and do some very basic configuration. And yeah, over to you.
Okay. So, okay, perfect. We are going to start with installing the extension. We are on the blog app, where we simply install the... Okay, I'll wait. Yeah, but we're going to work with the blog app, so we are going to install the extension onto the blog app and try to make a useful table out of it. Okay, so now with the new release, we can find Radmin in here. Simply, okay, a bit. Okay, second try. We can find it in the extensions catalog, which would be here. Then we installed up the extension, which ends up here. And after reloading the site, we can already use the Radmin view for the app. Okay. So under layout, we can select now the Radmin view. And exactly. Then we get a demo table, which is just the absolute basic. And by pressing on this button, we can edit the whole table. So when I press on it, I can give it a title and the view ID. The view ID is like the key of the table. So if we want later on to maybe create a script that specifically goes onto this table, it would be the view ID. In this case, we take DNN-Connect. And after putting in the title, we could edit the view ID, but it's not have to. And then we got a lot of new options, which would be a description. I'm going to leave this out now. And then we have the data that the table should receive. In our case, we can take a blog post. And then we got the data query name, so basically a query that we can insert into the table and then use in there. There's different ways of different queries to choose already, or we can create a single one. I'm going to stay with just the content type now.
I just hit OK just so they see.
Okay.
Don't. Yeah, just.
Okay. So after creating, using the posts, we can see now these are all the posts available in the table. And now there's another feature where.
No, wait. I need to first. Yeah. So okay. This is basically how you just start, right? Add the extension, select the content type. That's it. You get paging, you get searching, you get editing. Maybe quickly demo that briefly. So if you can edit a record, right? That's just out of the box, just there. And you can then do more, which Raul is now going to start showing. So in the next step, we're going to maybe say we would also like to have delete buttons on a row. We would like to be able to add a new record. At the moment, there's no UI to add a new blog post. So we're just going to reconfigure the entire table to just have a few more features.
Okay. Exactly. So by this icon, we can toggle the configuration mode, which brings us in here. And here we can edit or initialize the single columns. For example, the title. When I click on the cross, we have the column options, which would, in this case, for example, be the display settings or the header, tooltip values. And by clicking on save, I basically initialize the title column, which then makes it even possible to move it around in the table or to edit a column again and also add links to it. So we can, for example, link item to a specific view. For example, Radmin details, which would be just the detail view of the item. If I hit save now, we can see that there's a link on the item, and when I click on it, it shows the detail view of the selected item that it shows. Exactly. And yeah. That's super fast and super simple to do. By editing the table again, we can toggle on disable button or a delete button. We can also, okay, I come to this later. Exactly, we can also edit the paging mode. So toggle it on or off and decide the size, how Daniel already mentioned. And now when I hit save, we should have, we should have exactly one add button, so I can add new posts, for example. Or we have, we already had the add button, but the delete button. So yeah, this is, in my opinion, pretty simple, super easy to work with. Yeah.
Could you configure another column and then show how to sort them? And then maybe hide all the remaining columns so that we only have 2 columns, for example.
Okay. So. Okay.
Okay, just hit OK. Then we have 2
okay.
columns, then you can...
Okay.
Yeah, and now in the table settings, you can say to hide all the other columns that we did not configure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is basically, yes, go ahead.
Is there a reason why you guys have chosen for a table instead of a different view? Was it specifically chosen to be a table, or did you guys have another idea to showcase the details that you're showing now?
So the challenge that we normally have is that we need some form of a list. And I do think table would have been the only reasonable thing, but do you have another idea, or why are you asking?
No, if there's too much data, then you have to go through all of the columns one by one to check specifically what you're looking for, you know? So if there is a lot of columns back to back, then it becomes a little bit overwhelming. But I get the point, as in why the table is being chosen as a preference.
Yeah, and I mean, since this is like meant for working on something, right? Then of course, if something has 30 columns, you will probably end up saying, I only need these 3 for selecting whatever I want, right? That's just a typical working mode. Yes?
Do you have also like bulk deleting, like that you can select multiple rows and delete at once? Because the normal interface you don't have that.
So this thing doesn't have that. I guess if we would invest time to do that, it would probably make more sense to do it in the normal interface. Yeah. Yes, Salar.
Is it possible to programmatically fill these tables, this table? Because if I have an AI agent that goes out, scrapes data, and collects it in the way that for these appropriate fields, and then can send it through some API to populate it. Is that possible?
So to make sure I know your question, you're asking, yeah, so your question is, could we add data to this programmatically? So there is a web API, and there is, of course, also a C# API. That has nothing to do with this table by itself, because that's just a built-in feature of 2sxC anyhow, right? Because what we're doing here is we're just visualizing data which is already there for better administration purposes, right? And the example, of course, with the blog is fairly trivial, but it's still realistic, because the chances of somebody having, let's say, 200 blog posts and not wanting to scroll through all the blog posts to find out how many he has which are about a certain subject, that kind of a question is usually quite practical to solve with a table. But for your question, yeah, there's APIs already built in. Yeah. And Donchi is experimenting with some MCPs to make it more effective as well. Yeah.
Just build an example by using some SQL data. It fills my table.
Okay.
That's all right.
Cool.
It's very useful for me. But then I have, at the end of the row, the edit button. Can you customize that
So,
So then I can say, when I push the edit button, you have to do, not open the default edit UI, but do another thing.
yeah. So your question is, you would like to have a different action at the end of the row, for example, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're now going to show the next level of customization. So what we saw so far was the very quick way of working with things. And we believe that in 80% of the cases, that's all that you need. Now, again, we did realize that as soon as we unpack this, there will come new wishes. For example, you might need to, maybe you have a lot of true-false columns, and just having a bunch of checkboxes might not be what you want. Maybe you'd rather have, let's say, one column where true is always a wheelchair and false is no icon, and then a different column so that it becomes more useful. You might want to show a rating on a scale, like a bar or stars, instead of having a number there to just make it more useful. You might want to do some very custom linking, custom tooltipping, etc. And this is then again where custom actions would also come in. And Raul is going to demonstrate that next.
Okay, so I prepared something, or we prepared something. We have the option to create customizers. Those customizers basically are JavaScript or TypeScript. We use table later, and we can customize a single column or a whole table over via JavaScript and bind it into our project or in our app. So basically how this works is we have in, for example, this table now in the table configuration, we have the advanced options. And there we can put in a customizer's path, which in my case would be this one. And this is in the app folder of the app that we use with the Radmin. So in this case, if I hit save, we already see the columns kinda changed up. In this case, I made one customizer for the column complexity, which basically shows me a rating in stars. And we have the title that we just turned red, just as an example. And as Daniel already mentioned, this can be super useful, and it's actually pretty easy to do so. Okay, so we once have the customizers array, which gets loaded once you go onto the site. Only if you link it in the table configuration, though. So if it's not linked in there, it doesn't work, obviously. So then in here, we basically register the two customizers we have now. Okay, let's take the title that turned red once it got selected. So we got the target UID. This would be the table UID. Or we can, an easier way, use the view ID that we configured before for the table. And we implement this interface, which gives us those three methods that makes it possible to configure a column or a single column. Okay, so in this case, we check for the UID of the table. Technically, we could also not check for the UID, and it would apply to every table with a specific column, for example.
Let me just add one minor detail there. What we haven't quite shown yet is that since you have these tables, and you could like say this column is going to link to another view, right? Let's say you had a table containing the blog posts, and you wanted to be able to click on the tags, and it would show you a table of those tags. Then we're technically still in the same page, but we would maybe have different JavaScript customization for view number 1 versus view number 2. Just because in view number 1, we have the title maybe specially treated, maybe on the tag, which only has short titles, it doesn't make sense to do that. And that's why the JavaScript should always first decide, should I even be applied to this view or not? And that's why there's an initial check for that.
Okay, exactly. That's what he said. Okay, and in the customize tabulator function, we can work on the actual content that we see. So in this case, we take out the columns, we find the column's title in this case, and if this column is existing, we edit the column how we want it. In this case, we chose color red. And then, of course, return it, which is a super simple way to customize the columns, which in this case wouldn't be that beautiful, but it's red, so it's doing what it should do. But what I made on the other example is, for example, the rating of the complexity. Before, it was just one number from 1 to 10, telling us how complex it is. But I thought it's pretty, like, it isn't really useful. So, for example, we chose the resource table, checked it again if it's really that table. And then, after finding the column, we, okay, here. Exactly. We basically, here it is, okay. We search for the number, get the number, and then fill out the stars in the, depending on how big the number is, which gives us back exactly this view. And in my opinion, it's super simple to work with that. I got a quick workshop and I could directly use it. So
basically on the train to here, he learned about this feature and that he's going to have to present. So I think he did a great job. What do you guys say? Yep, more questions. Yes.
Regarding paging and how it handles like this big number.
Okay, how the paging works. So for those that were here yesterday, you might remember we introduced OData into 2sxc REST APIs. So the endpoint now supports like skip and top and stuff like that. And so the paging uses OData. So since 2sxc can do that now, the paging will not load all the data initially. To be honest, we might have to verify that briefly, that it actually does that, but I'm pretty sure it does, and otherwise we would make it happen, yeah. Mm-hmm. Martin.
Yes. Great. I can see a lot of use cases from have you thought about exporting this data to Excel?
Yes. So basically the question is, should there be an export button? And yes. So maybe you can quickly show them the tabulator documentation, like just Google tabulator. So again, our goal is not to reinvent the wheel. We're using like just really cool open source table systems. This one's called tabulator. There's a handful we could have used, and this just feels like one of the most mature and really great ones that we found. And I believe there are also like CSV and Excel exporters, which would of course make sense to use. At the moment, you could just do something with the configure stuff. Our goal was to make sure that the basic setup has like the 80% use case. And I'm agreeing that an export would also be part of that 80% use case. But that it stays out of the way so that anything you want to do that tabulator could do, but that there's no UI for, you can just then do in JavaScript. So, on the roadmap. Or to be contributed by anybody in here. Yeah. So, this is there a home? You're already on options. Can you click on the logo there? Yeah. Maybe scroll down a bit. See, so these are some examples what you can just easily do. You just saw a demo how we just did some star stuff. We already have the Booleans. And this kind of a bar to show how big a number is, that's a very typical thing people would want to customize. And our goal is maybe that we also have a bar example, but then probably it's not going to be the right color or whatever. And then you can just add a few lines of JavaScript to make sure your view looks perfect for your customer. Other questions?
And is this anything possible to use for in all applications, right? So it's just like, it doesn't matter, like, because sometimes users like you have like tables just.
Okay, so to try to rephrase your question, whether you could use Radmin for just showing data.
Just, yeah.
Okay, so you can. There's a small but. Okay, the first one, of course, is you don't want to enable edit buttons and stuff like that. That's the obvious one. The next one is it uses REST APIs to retrieve the data. So maybe you can quickly show that with F12 open, just so we're talking about the same thing. So the way it works today is that it will use REST APIs to either access a query or the normal content API. And that means if you would try to view this page anonymously right now, it would not work because there's a security layer saying the REST API for the blog posts is protected. Now, we can change that. Let's demo that. Can you maybe open this URL in a new browser? Let's do this step by step.
Exactly this?
Yeah, this one in an anonymous tab. So, and maybe remove that view config mode. I guess that's probably those two parameters. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So, at the moment, not very successful anonymous mode. Okay, let's go back to the other browser and let's first say that we would like anonymous to work. So in the settings, we're going to do, it needs two steps. So first step is that if you scroll down a bit, I believe it's in permissions, we can say, okay, click that. Now, we're first saying, yes, anonymous users should be able to view this. Let's look at that and go to the other one. It's not going to work yet, but we're getting there. So can you just F12 on the anonymous one just to be sure that we're seeing this the right error? But it should be, yeah. So you can see now that the one of the requests succeeded and the other one did not. Can you click on the schema one? And let's look at the URL of the schema. Click on that. Okay, this one I'm slightly surprised about. Huh? Yeah, this one should have actually worked as well. Maybe let's go back in the configuration because it's missing one. So, yeah, so we did set the permissions, right? Okay. So I'm just going to show you what should be done. We'll have to verify it because maybe we missed something. So after doing this, the endpoint which tells the table what columns exist, that one should work. But then that the data is being retrieved, we have to go to the app settings. So maybe you can quickly go to the normal app settings. And here we can go to the data. Let's say go to the blog posts. And on the right-hand side, not here, one back. On the right-hand side, we have permissions of the blog posts. And there we can specify if REST APIs should be allowed for certain user groups. So to make it work for anonymous users, or ideally probably, let's say not necessarily anonymous, but maybe a certain category of people that don't have edit permissions, you need to do this. If they have edit permissions, it's fine anyways. The minimum requirement is usually edit or admin, depending on what you're doing. Mm-hmm.
So normally you would not do it this way, right? You would build a view, and that view is for anonymous person.
So if you're doing something for fully anonymous, then yes, very, very likely you will want to customize it in some way that it doesn't feel like admin UI. You would probably want to make it more nicer, and then you would probably go back to the for each loop in C#. Yeah. Okay. So, Shift F5. Okay, so we did all of this. I believe you agree it's very simple to add and to do something very quickly within minutes. It has all the basic features. It detects what type of data it's going to show, date, Boolean, and things like that. It will automatically align things properly. If the date has a 0 time, it's going to show it in a shorter format, etc. What you did see, I guess, is the relationship display, but basically if something has relationships, it's going to show you the title of the first relationship, for example, of a tag, and it's going to show you how many more it has behind it. It's going to have a tooltip showing you the other tags. So it's quite practical just for all the basic needs that you have. We then demonstrated a few things to customize the table. That would include adding more buttons. We could disable search, paging. You saw how to customize columns. We were a little fast on that one, but you can also have like tooltips, which means the tooltips, by the way, can also contain placeholders. So a very common thing might be that you might have just an ID column, but maybe the tooltip would also have the title of that product in it, because we can use placeholders. And of course, you can do some very advanced customization, doing anything that Tabulator itself can do. So that's what we have today. And we did anonymous as well, but that didn't quite work on the demo. We're not done yet. There, of course, as soon as you start with this, there's more wishes. So export is a good one. I forgot to put that on my slides. We're going to implement a slightly better way to actually leverage the OData, because you would like to typically have, let's say, a list of something, and then just with OData get a sublist of something else. You saw the standardizer, the built-in details view, which is not very amazing. It just works. But maybe there's a certain wish to be able to customize that as well. We're going to implement that too. And of course, we would like this to be something where you guys also contribute something. Because we know that 2sxC is a beast and it's really hard to contribute to something that size. But Radmin is something new, something very small, and this is a great place to start contributing yourself. So we would really appreciate that. Keep that in mind. If you have a wish, do place it, but we're probably going to ask you to support in doing it as well and get your hands wet. That's about it. Thanks for watching. Yes, more questions.
Can you tell something about the possibilities of filtering? And I see in the configuration, I see expected parameters. Can I use that already for doing some filtering?
Okay, the expected parameters. Yes. So let's first try to explain it on the example of the details view. So when you install Radmin, there are two views which come pre-packaged. One of them is the first view that shows all the Radmin configurations. And the other one is let me quickly help out here. So this is the first built-in view, which is the one you would see by default. And you might remember when we started, it just showed 2 rows. Now we created a third one, so now it's showing 3. And if we look at actually the details view is not in here. Okay, so there's one view that's hidden as a view. Maybe I can show it in the admin UI. Because since we're including it in the bundle, it's not normal data, it's read-only. And just to explain one more detail, as we're creating extensions, they have their own data, but we're trying to keep it out of the way for the normal people. So this is still the blog app, but there's a scope down here called extensions-radmin in our case, and our other extensions do it the same way. Think of this like just a mini folder in your database to keep data out of the way and not confuse people. And if we look at the details view, I hope we can edit it because it's read-only. So we cannot edit it, but we can look at it. And you were asking about the expected parameters. Okay? What Radmin does is the moment in a column, you might remember he said this column should point to the details view. The Radmin will then look at the target view and say, okay, you're expecting this parameter. And Radmin picks that up by itself and make sure the link contains that. Pretty cool, right? Because otherwise, every time you'd link a view, you'd have to first know what to actually specify, and that would make it really hard. So here, the details view says, I expect these parameters, and if in the UI you say, I'm going to link to this, it just picks it up magically and will do that for you. Pretty neat. Does that answer your first question, or half of it? So, and your question is, could you then use this for something else, right? And the answer is yes. If we just go back to this normal situation here, and we would say we would like to reconfigure something, then at the moment, we only showed the case where we're using a table. Now, the one feature that we don't have yet is that with a table, you could use OData, and then you could already use the parameters. But if you use a query, then the parameters will be passed through to the query. So if your query has filtering capacity, then that's what's going to happen. Right? Because in a query, we can have parameters. We can say how that should behave. If I, instead of using a content type, specify a query, it's going to do that. And there are cases where I might want to specify both a content type and a query. That's because I might want to be able to add new data, and for that it needs to know what content type it is. Okay, but if all I want to do is visualize data from the query, I would not have to specify the content type. More questions? Yes, Martin.
Yes, it's Martijn.
Martijn, pardon me.
No problem, is it possible to connect to SharePoint and get data out of SharePoint and put it in Radmin?
So, yes and no. So basically, this system is really just for showing data which 2sxC has access to. Now, what does that entail? So 2sxC has data sources for CSVs, it has data sources for files, for all kinds of things, SQL. There is also a data source for SharePoint, but that one's closed source. So that one's not free. So can you do it? Yes, but it would still require the paid data source to SharePoint. Yes?
Just like technically to connect, so I may create like a view, I create a query to database to get data from the database, and I can use it.
Yes.
Okay. And like I might be able to connect to another database, right? So other than DNN.
Sure.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, because in the visual query, there's two SQL data sources. One is a DNN SQL data source. There you do not specify the connection string, but there's also the generic data source, and there you can specify a connection string. Yeah. Okay, I think we have it. Let's go get a coffee. Thanks for watching.